Ask a Vietnam veteran what truly haunted them in the jungle, and you'll hear the answers you expect. Ambushes on narrow trails, booby traps hidden beneath the ground, snipers disappearing into the tree line as quickly as they appeared. But stay in the conversation long enough, and their voice will shift. Their eyes drift. Their posture changes. They begin speaking more quietly, as if describing something the jungle itself left behind in their memory. They'll tell you about something different, something silent, something waiting. Not the enemy with a rifle, but the enemy with legs. Dozens of them. The giant centipede, the creature's soldiers called jungle runners, red devils, or simply those damn things, became one of the most disturbing creatures American soldiers encountered in Southeast Asia. For soldiers who lived and fought in Vietnam, these creatures were more than an annoyance. They were a constant, unpredictable threat. Men knew the next boot they reached for, the next sleeping bag they unrolled, even the next sandbag they leaned against, could be hiding one of the most aggressive arthropods on the planet. The giant centipede did not care about uniforms, rank, or the politics of the war. It did not fear humans. It did not flee from them. It lived where they slept, moved where they walked, and struck when disturbed. The pain these creatures delivered was unforgettable. Veterans compared it to being stabbed with a hot needle, jolted with electricity, or branded with a metal rod just pulled from a fire. Even decades after the war, many could recall the exact sensation of the bite. Vietnam's landscape made encounters with these creatures almost unavoidable. The jungle was more than a backdrop to the war. It was an ecosystem alive in every direction. The central highlands, the dark forests of the Third Corps, the river valleys thick with monsoon water, all of these environments created ideal hiding places for arthropods. The ground was layered with decomposing leaves, tangled roots, and nests of insects. Humidity clung to everything, forming droplets on rifles, boots, and helmets. Every log housed colonies of ants and beetles. Every mound of rotting vegetation hid spiders, scorpions, or centipedes. Soldiers didn't just enter the jungle. They stepped into a living world that reacted to every movement they made. The giant centipede thrived in this environment. Fast, bold, flexible, and perfectly adapted to crawl into any gap. It needed little more than a few inches of darkness to disappear completely. Boots, helmets, rucksacks, ponchos, ration boxes, sandbag walls. If a soldier used it, a centipede could hide inside it. And because American troops brought food, shade, moisture, and shelter into the jungle, their presence created new habitats that these creatures quickly learned to exploit. Every unit developed stories about giant centipedes. Myths spread quickly through platoons, especially among new arrivals who were still learning the jungle's rules. Some soldiers swore the centipedes chased people. Others insisted they dropped from trees onto exposed skin. Some claimed they grew longer than a man's arm, and although this was an exaggeration, the largest ones encountered were unsettlingly close to believable. Many men said the centipede's legs made a faint tapping sound on metal surfaces like helmets or canteens. Whether true or imagined, these stories grew because the fear behind them was real. Veterans described the bite in remarkably similar ways. The moment the creature's fangs pierced the skin, burning pain shot through the limb. There was no delay, no gradual increase. The body reacted instantly. Some soldiers dropped their rifles regardless of the danger around them. Others clutched the bitten limb, unable to speak as pain radiated upward. One infantryman said the bite felt like a red-hot nail driven straight through the bone. Another said it was worse than any shrapnel wound I ever took. The venom overwhelmed nerves, locking muscles in place, making fingers curl uncontrollably or legs buckle without warning. Even after the sharpest pain faded, the throbbing remained, spreading in waves for hours. Understanding the uniqueness of this threat requires understanding the creature itself. The giant centipede wasn't simply a large insect. It was a predator designed for speed and aggression. Its flattened body allowed it to slip into narrow spaces. Its legs worked in coordinated waves, letting it accelerate across any surface: mud, bark, cloth, even sandbags stacked at odd angles. It climbed easily, often appearing in places soldiers never expected. Its venom, a mixture of chemicals that overwhelmed small prey, produced immediate and severe pain in humans. And because it was nocturnal, its most active hours matched the times soldiers were resting, sleeping, or preparing for nighttime movement. The most common encounters happened with boots. Soldiers typically placed their boots outside their sleeping areas to let them dry. Darkness, warmth, and moisture created ideal shelters for centipedes. One soldier returning from a late patrol removed his socks, shook each boot twice, and slid his foot inside. The reaction was instantaneous. He jerked backward and fell, clutching his foot and gasping. His squad leader initially thought a shot had been fired. When the medic arrived and pulled the boot off, the centipede clung tightly to the soldier's toe. The swelling that followed left him unable to wear that boot for days. Sleeping bags offered no safety. Many soldiers slept on thin cots or directly on the ground. The bag's warmth attracted creatures seeking shelter from rain or nighttime chill. A private from the 1st Cavalry Division awoke to what he thought was a muscle cramp in his thigh. But the pain grew rapidly, pulsing outward. He tore the sleeping bag open and rolled into the mud, screaming. A centipede had crawled in earlier and bit him multiple times when he unknowingly rolled onto it. His legs spasmed violently. The medic attempted to examine him, but had to wait for the soldier's muscles to relax. The man couldn't walk the next day and had to be carried to an evacuation point. Radio operators faced their own risks. The PRC-25 radio required various wires, batteries, and attachments stored in pouches and pockets. One radio man reached into a side compartment during a nighttime patrol and felt something clamp onto his thumb. He recoiled, stumbling into a shallow foxhole as pain shot up his arm. His limbs seized in rhythmic spasms. He experienced cold sweats and dizziness, and his breathing became shallow. He was evacuated at dawn. Weeks later, he still felt numbness in the bitten hand. Even moments of rest weren't free from danger. A Marine leaned against a sandbag wall to eat. Unknown to him, a centipede had found a hiding place between two sandbags. When his shoulder pressed the seam, it struck. The Marine collapsed immediately from the shock. His platoon thought he had been shot. Only when they rolled him over did they see the centipede crawling away. He vomited twice before medics stabilized him. These encounters weren't rare. They were common enough that many units adopted rituals. Shake boots thoroughly. Hang sleeping bags during the day. Seal ration boxes. Keep helmets upside down only on smooth surfaces. Inspect sandbags occasionally. But the centipedes always found new hiding places. Soldiers joked about it to hide their unease, but fear was always beneath the surface. The pain these bites caused wasn't just a physical issue. It affected morale. A soldier who couldn't walk or hold a rifle changed the balance of a patrol. Plans changed when a man suddenly couldn't carry his gear. Missions sometimes paused after nighttime incidents because the emotional shock left soldiers rattled. Night operations became even more stressful when men realized they might be stepping into darkness while still recovering from a bite they received in their sleep. The jungle environment made treating bites difficult. Pain medication was limited, and medics often had only mild analgesics. The heat and humidity encouraged infection. Soldiers with swollen limbs struggled to move through mud and vegetation. Even basic tasks like maintaining rifles became challenges when hands were swollen or numb. Veterans later said that the giant centipede symbolized something larger than itself. It represented the unpredictability of Vietnam. The idea that danger was always present inside gear, under clothing, behind sandbags, in sleeping bags. It was a reminder that the jungle itself was an enemy, watching and waiting. Even after months in country, soldiers never became comfortable with the idea that something small enough to hide in a boot could bring a grown man to his knees. Veterans often said they feared the things they couldn't control more than the enemy they could see. A firefight had rules, patterns, rhythms that trained soldiers learned to navigate. But a bite delivered while you slept? A strike inside your boot? That created a different kind of fear, one rooted in vulnerability, in the knowledge that the jungle watched, even when the enemy didn't. Some men developed habits that stuck with them long after returning home. They checked their shoes every morning, even in the safety of civilian life. They shook out blankets or tapped their boots against the ground before slipping them on. One veteran admitted he avoided storing anything in dark containers for years because it reminded him of reaching into radio pouches in Vietnam. Another said that, to this day, he cannot sleep in a tightly zipped sleeping bag because it makes him feel trapped, like something could be crawling inside with him. These long-term effects weren't surprising. Encounters with giant centipedes weren't brief moments of discomfort. They were traumatic events. Imagine waking in the darkness of a monsoon night, hearing rain hammer against canvas and leaves, the air thick with humidity. You feel something shift near your leg. Maybe you brush it off in your sleep. Maybe you think it's just a wrinkle in the fabric. And then a bolt of pain snaps you awake, sharp enough to steal your breath. Your vision swims. Your muscles tighten. The darkness feels suffocating. The moment becomes burned into memory. These weren't hypothetical scenarios. They were lived experiences. In one platoon operating in the Central Highlands, a soldier was bitten during a heavy rainstorm. The squad had set up a temporary patrol base, using ponchos draped over poles to create makeshift shelters. The man fell asleep wrapped in his poncho liner. Hours later, he jolted awake screaming. He stumbled out into the rain, slipping in the mud, clutching his arm. His squad mates thought he was having a nightmare until they saw the swollen bite. The centipede had crawled into the folds of his poncho liner seeking warmth and bit him when he rolled onto it. The soldier was in so much pain he couldn't speak. The medic, soaked and working by flashlight, tried to calm him while the storm drowned out their shouts. The squad couldn't evacuate until the weather cleared. The soldier spent the night groaning, his arm pulsing in waves of pain as the rain hammered down around them. Another account came from a Special Forces advisor who encountered a centipede inside a village hutch. He had taken off his boots and placed them near the door. In the morning, he slid his foot in quickly, eager to move before daylight revealed their position. The bite came before he even realized something was inside the boot. He said he nearly blacked out from the pain. Local villagers recognized the injury immediately. They had their own name for the creature and knew its bite well. They brought herbal poultices and helped the medic treat the wound. But even with support, the soldier's foot swelled so dramatically he couldn't walk for 2 days. Encounters weren't limited to infantry either. Artillery units, engineers, medics, and support personnel all experienced the same risks. Bases had sandbagged bunkers, stacks of ammunition, wooden planks, and equipment piled everywhere, perfect hiding places. One group of engineers clearing brush around a fire support base found a large centipede hiding in the hollow of a log they planned to remove. As they shifted the log, the creature scurried out and struck the nearest soldier on the forearm. He dropped immediately, clutching his arm and shaking uncontrollably. The unit treated him quickly, but the swelling was so severe he couldn't bend his wrist for a week. The giant centipede's presence forced soldiers to adapt in ways the military never trained them for. They learned to move clothing and gear slowly, carefully. They learned not to thrust their hands into dark spaces. They learned to turn boots upside down and bang them against trees. They learned to roll sleeping bags tightly and keep them elevated. They learned that every piece of equipment was a potential hiding place. In many bases, men began forming new habits that became unofficial standard practice. Some hung their boots on sticks driven into the ground. Others tied their sleeves shut during the night so nothing could crawl in. A few men even tucked their pant legs into their boots while sleeping, despite the discomfort, to create at least some barrier against insects. But no matter how many precautions soldiers took, the centipedes always found ways to surprise them. One Marine recounted a moment when he set his helmet upside down on a crate while cleaning his rifle. After finishing, he reached for the helmet without thinking. As his fingers touched the rim, something moved inside. He froze. Slowly, he tipped the helmet and saw a giant centipede curling inside the liner. He dropped the helmet and stepped away, heart pounding. He later said it frightened him more than any firefight he'd been in, because, at least in a firefight, you know where the threat is coming from. Another soldier described being bitten during a night ambush operation. His squad was positioned along a narrow trail, each man spaced out, watching the darkness. Hours passed in silence except for the sounds of the jungle. The soldier leaned back against a tree, adjusting his grip on his rifle. He felt a sudden sting on his upper arm. At first, he thought he brushed against a thorn. Then the pain surged. He clenched his teeth, trying not to make a sound, but his breath came in sharp bursts. His arm locked in place. Panic flooded him, not just from the bite, but from the fear of alerting the enemy. He remained silent until the patrol ended, enduring the pain alone. When the squad exfiltrated hours later, the medic finally examined the bite. The soldier said he had no memory of the walk back, only flashes between waves of pain. These experiences demonstrate why soldiers saw the giant centipede as more than just a nuisance. It wasn't simply an insect. It was a threat that attacked without warning, caused incapacitating pain, and turned everyday tasks into potential hazards. The jungle already made life difficult: constant rain, thick vegetation, oppressive heat, insects biting, leeches attaching, gear failing. Adding a creature capable of delivering such intense pain amplified the stress soldiers lived with daily. The giant centipede didn't care about military operations, but it affected them nonetheless. Missions were delayed because soldiers couldn't walk. Radios went silent because operators couldn't grip their equipment. Morale dropped each time someone discovered a centipede crawling on their gear. The emotional weight accumulated over time. Soldiers became jumpy. Sudden movements triggered instinctive reactions. Even harmless creatures, like beetles or small lizards, could send a man scrambling because he thought he saw the ripple of centipede legs. Medics faced their own challenges. Treating a centipede bite required calming the soldier, reducing swelling, and monitoring vital signs. They had limited painkillers and even fewer supplies for swelling. They used cold cloths, elevation, and antihistamines, but relief was minimal. Some medics tried folk remedies they learned from local villagers. Others simply reassured the soldier that the pain would ease eventually. But reassurance didn't help much when a man couldn't stand or hold his weapon. In fire bases, medical staff documented dozens of cases during each monsoon season. Thick rains pushed centipedes into higher ground sandbags, bunkers, sleeping areas, storage areas. Men learned to avoid dark corners, yet dark corners were everywhere. The creatures slipped through cracks in bamboo walls, crawled under tent flaps, and hid beneath crates of ammunition. Even during brief moments of rest, soldiers remained on alert, scanning the shadows for movement. And yet, for all the pain they caused, the giant centipedes weren't malicious. They defended themselves in a world filled with larger predators. They sought warmth and shelter wherever they could find it. Unfortunately for soldiers, their gear and living spaces provided perfect conditions. Vietnam was full of dangers, from the enemy to the environment, but the giant centipede embodied a specific kind of fear. It represented the unseen, the unexpected, the reminder that in the jungle, you were never truly alone. Understanding the presence of giant centipedes in Vietnam helps explain why veterans describe the war the way they do. It wasn't only firefights or ambushes. It was the constant awareness that anything around them, boots, bags, bunkers, branches, could become a threat. The jungle itself felt hostile, filled with creatures ready to defend their ground. Survival required vigilance, not only against the enemy, but against nature itself. Many veterans say the jungle followed them home. They still check their gear. They still shake their shoes. They still feel the memory of that sudden, electric pain, the way it stole their breath and locked their muscles. A creature so small by comparison to the weapons of war left an impact just as lasting. And that says something about the intensity of life in Vietnam. If you're a veteran watching this, you already know these stories. You live them. And today, your experiences still matter. For everyone else, if you learned something new, hit that like button and subscribe for more documented history, the kind that goes beyond the simplified version, and drop a comment. Whether you're a veteran with your own centipede story or someone discovering this for the first time, we want to hear from you.